Welcome everyone, this is Danny and Karl with Get Wisdom, and today we're going to continue with the channeling series. And Karl is going to channel C.S. Lewis today, who is a renowned author and public speaker figure. He passed away the same day that John F. Kennedy was assassinated, along with Aldous Huxley. And he was from the UK, famous writer of the Narnia series, and he's also a pretty famous Christian apologetics writer, the defense of Christianity. He was quite good at that and accepted in many denominations, his work in that area. And he was a good friend of J.R.R. Tolkien, and he also wrote a book called The Screwtape Letters, and also a book called Mere Christianity, which is the book that I read of his many years ago, and quite impressive. The fellow's quite impressive. His personal life was very interesting too, and there's been a lot of work done about this fellow, and so that's who we're going to channel today. And we have 6 questions for him, and I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and thank you especially, Karl, for doing this with us every week. And maybe we can have a little discussion about C.S. Lewis and Christian apologetics, and I don't know, maybe you know something about the Narnia series. I haven't read that myself, but I know it's a hugely popular book. I think it's been in continuous print since 1957. 100 million copies sold in 47 different languages.
Well, that has all the earmarks of something that has inner truth.
Yeah,
because that is what leads to popularity. It's resonating. It's striking a chord with people, and they're relating to it and the meaning of it in a deep way, as a maybe a mythology parallel to something that resonates in their own history for all they know consciously. This is the weird dynamic we're in, that we don't even know our own lineage and our own pedigree going back through time, even though we've lived multiple lives. And the irony is that as an immortal being, all we know is what happened maybe beyond the age of 5 or so, when we tend to remember things. Those early years usually are pretty much a blank for most folks, unless there's serious trauma of some kind that's kind of indelible. So even that, we lose. And so we're just seeing this tip of the iceberg that is us and our heritage. So this is interesting when someone gets traction with lots of other people. And of course, there can be the more notorious sources of reading pleasure and media kind of machinations that sort of resonate with a darker side of us and so on. But this is a fellow whose life I really appreciate. I really appreciate the people who struggle with faith, because many, many do. And there's many reasons for that. And it isn't their failings. It isn't their weakness. It's sometimes that they're able to see some of the corruption in religion itself, and that discourages them. And rightfully so in one sense, but they're throwing the baby out with the bathwater in another.
Yeah,
and then they
he had
struggle.
the ability to overlook a lot of that. So he was in the middle of this. He came from Ireland. Yep. He went to the UK. He was depressed by the UK, and he was criticized. Once he went from being an atheist to a Christian, he was criticized for overlooking the differences in the British Isles between Roman Catholicism and the Protestant faith. But he basically kind of surpassed it in a way, because in his apologetic writings, it was accepted irrespective of the Christian denomination. They accepted him as his spokesperson for the validity of Christianity, which was remarkable, that he wasn't thrown into one camp or the other.
That is remarkable as well. And I think that's because there is an inner core truth here.
Yeah.
That Christianity coalesces around. And not everyone likes that label. They don't like what it seems to represent to them. But you can't get around truth. Truth is truth.
Yeah.
And then it comes in various wrappings, and some of that is open to question and historical uncertainty and all of that kind of more superficial consideration. I remember, as I don't know much about the Narnia series myself.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of fiction to begin with. I don't have time for it. That's what I always tell people. I'm going to wait till I retire, and then maybe I'll catch up on all those mystery novels and the fun stuff.
Yeah, that's the way I feel. It's like once we know that the divine human experiment's successful, then we can go play. But right now, it's like there's more pressing issues,
Exactly. Trying to save the world here. No time for
fiction.
For too much personal pleasure, just a modicum. But I remember as a kid that I was always eager for learning things and thirsting for knowledge. And I would go up in my attic, because my parents had boxes of books up there that they read growing up and whatnot. And I would go through those boxes of books and read things. And one day I ran across this weird book, The Screwtape Letters.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
And sat down with it.
Yeah.
And I have this image of myself sitting in my attic with light from this one end window. It's like an old house,
right,
with a window at one end, a window at the other, a small one.
Right.
And in that dim light, I would read. And I remembered reading this, and it was very striking. I remember it more as an impression than anything factual, but it was very powerful. And there was an authenticity in it, but at the same time, it was disturbing and it was shocking to me. And I didn't fully appreciate the context of what it was intending to do. And I guess now, what it is a sort of a portrait of an evil being trying to deceive others, and it was sort of like setting out his case.
Yeah, he's
And I'm
training
sure
another demon.
yeah,
It was
yeah,
a senior demon training a junior demon, and that was the whole discourse there. Yeah, and for a kid, because I read that young too. I don't know if I was as young as you when I read it, but when I read it, I had that same feeling like oh my god, like holy crap. That was kind of my reaction to it. Like, oh, this is serious. And it's interesting too because he in later years he said that was the one thing he wrote that he did not enjoy writing. He didn't enjoy
well,
writing
good
it.
for him. I'm glad to hear that because I didn't much enjoy reading it. But I guess I was too young and I wasn't tutored. I wasn't
Yeah.
given an overview.
Right.
It's when as a kid, when people would talk about dark things, they would just kind of hush me up and hush up the subject and warn me away from certain things. Don't talk to strangers. And so you get sort of the sense there's something sinister in the world,
Yeah.
but you don't learn much about it. Nowadays, it's all on TV all day long. So
Right.
you can't avoid it as a child. You see
Yeah.
the serial killers and the rapists and
Right.
the arch criminals on display and learn all their handiworking, and it's rather a different world. But he really fit a wonderful place as a representative and spokesperson for the faith. And these days, I'm kind of revenue neutral. I was raised as a Christian, but not in a way that was so doctrinaire that I came away with a disdain for other faiths.
Right.
My father was a minister, but he was very ecumenical in his approach. And he was always inviting people from other churches and synagogues to come to services at our church, and saw to it that I would go to services in other places to see them in action.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very enlightening because it's not weird and different and bizarre. It might be different, but it's not bizarre. It's just the way they do things, and the differences aren't that huge. So these days, I really value all my religious friends out there who keep the faith in whatever way they've chosen and are true believers. That's a precious commodity in today's world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Today's
to
world,
waste
because
time,
today's world is very different from when you
oh
grew
my
up.
goodness.
It wasn't. It's not a friendly place to be religious. It just isn't.
Yeah. And now you have the liberals politically who want to stomp out religion. I mean, this is a kind of new evil that is abroad in the land and is looming. So, however you can find a way to faith through whatever means, whatever spokesperson can appeal to you, I'm all for it. The doctrinal details, that's your own personal
Yeah.
business, and those things are never very important.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the testament to his work, is because he skillfully avoided that, but not in a way that it hurt his argument. His argument was always down to earth, practical. You didn't need to be a scholar. You didn't need to know the Bible really well. He just gave analogies and examples that were relatable. And it was even said that during World War II, his radio broadcasts were more popular than Churchill's. That's how much how revered he was. And then the other thing that was notable is how popular he became in the U.S. So, he was able to transcend, the religious differences and also the cultural differences in his world. And though if you read about him, he never really thought of himself as a modern day, voice in that respect. He tried. I think when I read about him, they talked about him having more affinity for the ancient forms of man in Europe. Like he thought of him. He very much he very much identified with the writers of the Christian literature from the 16th century, like that. That the modernity of his day was something that repulsed him. So he always tried to reference back to an earlier time, but yet when he wrote, his great appeal was not from people who would identify him in the same way. They were modern people, concerned about morality, war, religion, all those things.
Well, this has been a hard-won battle all the way along to have the discussion of individual sovereignty. That's a powerful notion. And historically, it all started with the divine, that there was a divine origin of things and a divine creation, and we're a deliberate creation, and we're here for a purpose that is divine, and there's an agenda that is divine, and we're living that if we're living right, if we're living in an alignment with the divine and with divine wisdom. And that is something that is easily shuffled aside, with a kind of a modern spin and a more secular approach that is often now mandated in the public square by more and more and more people. They see religion as divisive, so exclude it. Don't let anything come up in public discourse because it'll be divisive. And there's a danger in that, in letting faith die out. And from all I've learned about the work of Get Wisdom and seeing the big picture, what's going on, what is really the agenda for humanity right now, and the challenges, the one thing you don't want to have die out is faith in the Almighty, because that's our lifeline. Yeah. And it's our only hope, frankly, of surviving what we're faced with. Yeah. So anyone who comes forward reminding people of divine truth and divine wisdom is a valuable asset. And they're on the right team. Yeah. The jerseys might change, the uniforms might change. But if they're talking about divine truth in some way or another, it's a valuable contribution. And we need to see those people. And someone like you're talking about his radio program being so embraced. Well, I'm sure that was divine inspiration and divine hope coming through him.
Yeah.
Because that's what happens when someone of faith wants to inspire others and wants to uplift.
And it was apparently recognized by the right people, because it would have been easy for that not to happen. Because at the time he was at Oxford, and Oxford was getting their knickers in a twist, the management there, because he was becoming popular under the guise of religion. And that's not what they wanted to see from, someone going up the ranks in academia in those years. They wanted someone to leave all that religious stuff in the churches. It doesn't belong at Oxford, but there he was, becoming a champion of faith in God and explaining it in terms of a person who was once an atheist.
Yeah, God forbid.
So
you should talk
so there's
about
Oxford, promoting the atheistic, upper echelons of academia, and here comes this guy, So,
so
there was a problem there. It could have easily been quashed. Yeah.
Well, and that's something I think I especially revere, because you can't just write it off to brainwashing, the psychological programming,
or a fluke, right? Or some kind of fluke, like it was just a mistake. He slipped through the cracks somehow. Yeah.
Well, this is the view of the secular world about religion, that it's all a kind of brainwashing done to the young to make them believe in this fantasy and this fairy tale of God and so on. And so it sort of gets in while they're young and innocent and naive, and then it sticks, and then they're stuck with these beliefs, and it lasts all life long. And we hope they die out soon, so this will all go away. But that's how it's done. It doesn't have logic to it. It doesn't have any reason. It's just knee-jerk exposure to ideas and a manipulation.
Yeah.
That's what the secular world believes about this.
Yeah.
And they don't realize the secular perspective is a kind of manipulation in its own right. And it fills a vacuum from lack of faith in something better, something more that doesn't have to be inculcated through brainwashing. It can be inspired within a person who is at least halfway open to the possibility that there is something real out there.
Yeah.
And that's true of the people who find their way back to faith, or maybe find it for the first time as an adult because it was denied them when they were young. They grew up in a setting where there was no talk of such thing.
Yeah.
So those people who do it the hard way sort of have to talk their way into it again through really asking tough questions
Yeah.
and setting up hurdles
Yeah.
and wanting proof and wanting evidence and wanting substantiation. That is very valuable because it can help others who struggle with faith to find it themselves by looking at the example of someone who went through the arguments and the counter arguments and gave it equal weight.
Yeah. And that's something he clearly did and wrote about. And he tried his hand at poetry, and he was never recognized as a good poet, probably because he wasn't a good poet. But when it came to prose, he became the king rather quick, and it started young. He started writing when he was young. And another person that I'll probably mention, because she's mentioned in one of the questions, is Janie Moore, who was the mother of his good friend, and him and his good friend went to enlisted and went to World War I. His friend was killed, and they made a pact with each other to take care of each other's family if one passed away. Well, he returned and took care of this fellow's mother, Janie Moore, and he ended up falling in love with her, and they spent their life together until she died. And then he married later in life to a woman named Joy. But the women in his life were critically important in his development, I think. His mother died when he was young, and prior to his mother's death, he had a very idyllic childhood in the countryside with his brother, and I think his first introduction to God was through nature. And then after his education, when his mother died, his father sent him to school. That's when he fell away from the faith, and partly was he was harmed. He was harmed by the death of his mother when he was young. So all of this came about under the tutelage, if you will, of loving, caring women that were with him. 3 of them, apparently, his mother, Janie Moore, and his wife, Joy, throughout his life, that I think contributed largely to his ability to do what he did.
Well, we'll see what he has to say about that. I know you want to ask him
Yeah.
about those relationships. I think that will be revealing and helpful.
Yeah.
Because I think it's useful, whatever we can learn about this fellow and what made him tick and what made him do what he did can be instructive for us, because a lot of people are in this sort of state of incompletion, is one way to look at it, that they know there's got to be something more to life that they're not getting, but they're not sure what it is. And no one wants to be made a fool of. No one wants to be on the wrong side and be embarrassed or humiliated and taken to task and all that. So it's hard to believe in something that isn't universally embraced and be steadfast and really to believe it wholly. That is a tough thing. And I see this all the time in my work in helping people with healing, that one of the biggest obstacles is their own lack of belief in the divine and belief in themselves as well. And if you don't believe in God, God can't help you because it goes against your choice to disbelieve, to distance yourself.
Right.
And this is the trap the world's fallen into
Yeah. It's the
with a
ultimate
lot of help.
catch-22.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
ultimate. Yeah.
But if if you're feeling uneasy and you're thinking maybe that wasn't such a great idea to just shove it off and you know go play hooky and go fishing on Sunday or whatever and not go to church and all that sort of thing, it's not easy to find your way back to a 100% belief in the Almighty.
Right.
So we could all use some help with that. And anyone who can weigh in and give us encouragement is doing a really good thing. It's really a blessing to engage with such folks because the world needs those messages more than ever now.
Yeah.
So I'm
Exactly.
looking forward to this. He was a very innovative and forward thinking person. And I'm sure that's a big part of how he was able to make this retread of his own being successful
Hmm.
in having to come from behind, having turned away from the divine and disbelieving so, and then having to prove it to himself in the end and making his way back into the fold. It's really a saga that could be lived by untold, probably billions of human beings at this point.
Right. Wouldn't that
Because
be
the
nice?
average person out there, has fairly shaky faith in things.
Yeah.
Even
Well,
if they're,
most people are now are just in survival mode. You
yeah,
know,
well,
they.
and it's sad to see, and I see it a lot with people I work with who are believers, quote unquote, but they never use prayer.
Yeah.
They can't believe that it's going to work. They can't believe it's going to help. Well, this is a degree of disbelief then.
Right.
That if you
Yeah.
make a direct request to the Almighty, it's not going to lead anywhere.
Yeah. And it's been relegated to the same kind of thing as like contemplation. Well, I have time for contemplation. I have to get up and go to work. I have to take care of my family. I have to do this. I have to do that. I have to get my sleep. And all that stuff are valid concerns. But gosh, the price that's paid for not being able to do something like that, which is so great about him because he's still, he's kind of like still with us. He's a writer. His Narnia books are still getting read. Hopefully a lot of them are children, and so let's maybe we should go ahead and hear from this guy.
All right.
See what he
I'm up
says.
for it. All right, I will do my thing. I get in a certain state of consciousness to do this, and I set up safety around the work. I go to the creator of all that is and ask creator to connect me to my target. I do that for accuracy and also for safety and security so that I connect to whoever I want to speak with through the Almighty so it's protected and I reach that target and not an imposter of some kind. Most channelers don't use those safeguards and they're being duped right now. Talking to imposters who are usually extraterrestrial psychics, believe it or not, they're listening for any intuitive outreach, people doing meditation, people using Ouija boards, people using tarot cards and things, wanting to connect with something larger, maybe talk to their higher self, or maybe try to speak with an angel or call on an angel. And if they don't ask for safety and protection, it's likely an extraterrestrial psychic will get there first. And their belief may not actually be adequate to talk to the divine directly, even though they're thinking of themselves as a spiritual person. It might be rusty, their true spirituality, and that works against them too. So whatever way that this happens, usually people are surprised when they're able to channel, and then they feel grateful and lucky, and they don't question it. They just
Right.
think, "Oh, I got my connection," and then they go,
Right.
and they'll get a lot of assurance and reassurance and help from their source. But it will be warmed over spiritual principles and doctrine. And the extraterrestrials are very adept at this. They know all about our beliefs. They followed us for thousands and thousands of years. They've been at this. So they can talk the talk. And meanwhile, they're not going to give you real answers and real help. So it'll be bland upliftments and encouragement and talk about love and so on. And it's useful and valid up to a point, but they won't help you heal things in a significant, deep way. That's a big point of differentiation. So I don't want to go on and on about that, but just to caution people to be skeptical of channeling. The proof is in the pudding. And if channelers are only talking about sweetness and light, and they're never dealing with healing, real healing, not just, okay, we'll give you a pep talk
Right.
and tell you more sweetness and light stories and how ascension's coming and it's all wonderful and there's nothing you have to do. That is a disinformation campaign right there. So we're here to help people, and that's why we're talking to beings in the light to see what they can tell us about what's facing us, where we've gone wrong maybe, and how we can move in a better direction, and what we can do personally. Because there's always something you personally can do. And no one else will tell you this, unfortunately, sadly, in this world that we have. So so I will make the connection and then we will hear from him when he's on board, so to speak.
Okay. Thank you.
This is Clive Lewis speaking.
Thank you for joining us. Were you able to transition successfully upon your death to the light? Who was there to greet you?
I was able to transition successfully. I was one of the very lucky people. It is the majority, but a large minority of people do not transition successfully and remain stuck in limbo. This you know much about, and we applaud you for addressing this age-old problem. It is a way station of sink, a trap that takes some of the best people and diverts them into a kind of oblivion that might be temporary, but does not feel so to the beings trapped in a state of nothingness with no stimuli unless there is tormenting going on by dark beings. Their dilemma is not being able to see the light callers. And I was greeted by my second mother, who came from the light to escort me. And this was a double blessing because she and I have a very long history of association in other lifetimes. The story you spoke of, the pact I had with my war buddy, so to speak, to take care of one another's families should it come to that, was arranged through divine ministration and an inner inspiration within the both of us, because our families indeed are interlinked as part of a soul collective. This is typical for family groups, at least many. Some are indeed happenstance, the result of random chances, and often a consequence of errors in judgment. So people end up with someone inimical to their interests. In the most common scenario, people end up as life partners with individuals they have had dealings with in other lifetimes before. And that is true whether it is a positive outcome or a highly negative one. Karma will bring back to you your nemesis who haunted other lives and was your undoing in being an archenemy of sorts, and sometimes a serious one. People end up married to a tormentor who has destroyed lives of theirs in other settings, times, and places. So I was lucky, and it was my faith that enabled that to happen. So I was doubly blessed in sharing my life with someone with whom I had a deep, long-standing prior association and shared a divine outlook and desire to make a difference in the world. And that is a rare thing in life. Most relationships are a kind of holding action, or at best, an attempt to heal at least some of what has gone before, but rarely takes hold in a deep way and results in great benefit, more of a stopgap coping mechanism with life. And then it is up to future lives to reckon with not only all that came previously, but even the most recent attempts at repair that fell short and maybe left newer problems piling onto the mix. So any life that goes well, any relationship that brings love to you is to be cherished. It is truly a divine gift. And that was true for me in the many divine blessings bestowed on me during my life. I called it forth, and that is the message to take away from this. It was not I was special. It was not I was anointed. It was not that I was chosen by God to come and be a prophet, of sorts at least. I chose that role to play myself. It fit with the divine plan and the divine desire to see an upliftment of humanity in the tough century within which my life came about. There were many situations taking humanity to the brink of oblivion. I played at least some part to help keep things going for many people. That is a true accomplishment that was enabled by divine inspiration within me. You too can choose your lives. So that is what I would say is the lesson in all of this with my comings and goings. I came down to do light work for the mission of the divine human, to fight against evil and to push it back. I did what I could, but I chose that path. I chose to be human in the first place. I could have been other things and have been other things in other worlds. You too have chosen to be here. So it might be worth some introspection to ask, how are you doing? How successful is your life? Are you contributing something to your own growth? Are you gaining ground or falling behind? Are you simply marking time? Are you contributing anything to the greater world? I assure you that you can. If you only pray for the betterment of humanity, you will accomplish more than the average person, and you will have many blessings rewarding you in the future.
Okay, thank you. You had influential women in your life. By most accounts, these were your mother, Janie Moore, your wife, Joy, who preceded you in death by only 3 years. How were you shaped, supported, and guided in these relationships, and how did they contribute to your legacy?
Janie was the one with the long term prior association I was just speaking of. And my wife as well was drawn to me because we are compatriots and members of a soul collective. This is true for most family groupings and most lifelong partners, or at least those chosen to be partners, if only for a short while, because of death and so on. Nonetheless, there are a number of individuals with whom each one of you is compatible, not all of whom are known to you and within a close inner circle who you will recognize as someone who could be next in line should tragedy strike your existing partner. But that is not necessary for there to be a kind of interchange and a coming together of like-minded individuals. It will happen through a divine orchestration. That is how matchmaking is done. By and large, it is done by the divine realm. This will not happen as much for the non-believer. They are making their choice, as your channel was stating so clearly in the prior discussion, to be on their own. This can hold you back dramatically from accomplishing what you came to do. Normally, the life plan you construct prior to incarnating from infancy into a new life will include many of the key people you wish to associate with and assist you in accomplishing various segments of your life journey. They are strategically positioned through incarnations of their own. And then the divine realm will do what is needed to create an opening, a path to come together and have a kind of interplay, often with a recognition there is something special in the other party that causes a relationship to form and perhaps even last a lifetime. This is how the world works to promote the cause of the divine. There is much working against it. The ladies in my life both gave me the greatest of blessings that can be experienced by a being of any kind. They gave love to me, love and nurturing. Love is a divine attribute. It originates from the divine. It is not something you can buy from Amazon. You cannot get it on demand anywhere from anyone. If you try, you will get a simulation done by a willing actor in the moment to placate you, perhaps working for money or some other benefit, going through the motions. There may even be some amount of recognition that it is a humanitarian gesture, but mostly that is to placate their own feeling of being used in some way and to justify selling themselves. When love is genuine, it comes from an inner soul alignment with the divine. The life force energy that keeps you going, keeps you breathing, keeps your heart beating, and fuels the connection to your consciousness as an extension of your soul itself, is a frequency of energy that contains love as a chief component. You have to work at it to be in denial of love. You can be corrupted to have a faulty way of interacting with those energies. So you will be insensitive and indifferent to the love frequencies they contain. That is the dilemma of the sociopath, the narcissist, those with a so-called character disorder who are diminished in their ability to receive communications from their higher self that governs the life force energy and its consequences, its deployment within the person, as well as sources of guidance, and in many cases, a direct interplay with other divine beings and with Creator many times as well. When people pray to God, it may often be God who answers the prayer. It is not always an underling. What these ladies were giving me was love. And that love not only gave me pleasure and helped support me, keep me propped up at times when I weakened and faltered, but kept alive within me my own connection to the divine. Love is the universal passport to the workings of divinity everywhere. Any being in the universe, at least outside of your galaxy, who you approach in a loving way will respond in kind, because all are touched by love and all are living through love and with love. Love encompasses within it the principles for living in the first place. the honoring of the individual as having sovereignty and standing as a soul-based being created for a purpose and having equal value in the eyes of the Almighty, and whose yearnings of the soul are the yearnings of an aspect of God's consciousness to begin with. When your makeup is part and parcel an aspect of the divine toolkit, you will only go wrong if you choose in some way to step aside from alignment with your true origin and become a false reflection of your true self. This is what happens when beings lower themselves through non-divine thoughts, feelings, and actions. Love will bring you back into alignment, because anything non-divine is lacking in love in some respect. Those special individuals whom you share the most love with are a living link to God in expressing that love to you. That is why I was so devoted to them. A skeptic might say, those were acts of selfishness. There are people who do believe in that fashion, that loving a woman and sharing a marriage is simply a convenience, and the wife could be thought of as a kind of property, an unpaid servant in a sense, other than sharing the livelihood. What that reflects is the absence of love in that spouse, seeing their partner in such a limited scope. When true love is present, it transcends the material altogether. It is so much larger, richer, deeper, and more fulfilling to be in love and to love another deeply than any thought of material gain could begin to replace it. Those who are loved are blessed. Those who give love are equally blessed, because they are forming a healing circuit of divinity in action through the energy of love that can heal, protect, inspire, and save the other party from all manner of negative outcomes and disastrous consequences from being out of alignment with the divine. For that is when you are truly at risk. When you go alone, you are on a tightrope without a safety net. People choose to do so every day, not realizing they are risking their own soul. The many fictional accounts of selling one's soul to the devil have a basic validity in truth. The devil will not come to you and ask you to sign a contract. You will make the decision on your own, if that is to be. In turning away from the Almighty and giving up on the idea of the divine and simply going off on your own. You, in effect, are handing yourself over to the darkness, because that will be all that is in your world. It will be you and the interlopers. There might be good people who still help you, still support you, still care about you. But there will be a limit to what they can offer. Love as a bridge to the divine can save you if it keeps you in divine alignment. That will be a tremendous blessing in many ways, seen and unseen. People avoid many disasters that are prevented by the divine in answer to the loving impulses they share with others and even with themselves. This sets you up for a life of fullness and a rich experience and a joyous immersion in love. That is the way to live. And those who bring it your way are to be cherished. That is what I did in my close concern and care that I showed the women in my life. It was their divinity that was drawing me to them and rewarding me in the bargain.
Okay, thank you. You are perhaps best known as the author of the Narnia series in continuous publication since 1956, selling over 100 million copies in 47 languages. The revelations there are often related to Christian themes. Where did this excel, and what would you now include, if you could, in order to better educate the young readers of today?